Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and quiet forests, there lived a young man named Elias. Elias was like many others in his village, hard-working, kind, but often feeling as if something was missing in his life. He woke up each day, tended to his fields, ate his meals, and slept, only to repeat the same routine the next day. There was no great suffering in his life, but there was no great joy either. It was as if he were walking through life half asleep, never fully awake to the possibilities around him. One evening, as Elias sat by the fire, his grandfather, an old man with a face lined by years of wisdom, placed a book in his hands. The book was old, its pages yellowed with age, its cover worn from years of use. "Read this," his grandfather said simply. Elias hesitated. He had never been a reader. The few times he had tried, the words seemed to swim before his eyes, and he quickly grew bored. But out of respect for his grandfather, he nodded and opened the book. At first, the words made little sense. The sentences were long, the ideas unfamiliar. But as he forced himself to continue, something strange began to happen. The words started to form pictures in his mind. He saw places he had never visited, met people he had never known, and heard ideas that made his heart beat faster. For the first time in his life, Elias felt truly alive. That night, he read until his eyes grew heavy. The next morning, he woke with a hunger he had never felt before. Not for food, but for more of the words that had stirred his soul. He returned to his grandfather and asked for another book. The old man smiled and handed him a second, then a third. With each page, Elias felt himself changing. The world around him, once dull and predictable, now seemed full of mystery and wonder. One day, as he walked through the village, he noticed things he had never seen before. The way the sunlight danced on the leaves, the sound of the blacksmith's hammer ringing like a bell, the laughter of children playing near the river. It was as if he had been blind all his life and now, for the first time, could see. Reading had not just given him knowledge. It had awakened his senses, sharpened his mind, and deepened his understanding of the world. But the greatest change was within. The books he read spoke of courage, of perseverance, of the strength of the human spirit. They told stories of men and women who had faced great hardships and yet never gave up. Elias realized that his own struggles, his doubts, his fears, his sense of being lost, were not unique. Others had felt them too, and they had found ways to overcome. He began to see his life not as a series of chores, but as a journey, an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become stronger. As the seasons passed, Elias became a different man. The villagers noticed it too. Where once he had been quiet and withdrawn, he now spoke with confidence. He helped others not just with his hands, but with his words, offering advice, comfort, and sometimes even challenge. When a drought struck the land, and many grew fearful, Elias remained calm. He remembered the stories of those who had endured worse, and he knew that hardship could be faced with dignity. He became a source of strength for his village, not because he was fearless, but because he had learned through reading that fear could be mastered. Years later, when his grandfather lay on his deathbed, he called Elias to his side. "Do you understand now?" the old man asked. Elias nodded. Reading had given him more than knowledge. It had given him a life. It had taught him how to think, how to feel, how to live with purpose. Without it, he might have spent his days in shadow, never knowing the light that words could bring. The story of Elias is not unique. For centuries, books have been the silent teachers of humanity. They contain the wisdom of the ages, the struggles and triumphs of those who came before us. To read is to step into a conversation that has been going on for thousands of years, a conversation about what it means to be human, to suffer, to love, to endure. When you read, you are never alone. The greatest minds in history become your companions. Marcus Aurelius whispers to you about resilience. Seneca teaches you about the shortness of life and the importance of virtue. Epictetus reminds you that what truly matters is not what happens to you, but how you respond. These are not just ideas. They are tools for living, weapons against ignorance and despair. Reading also changes the way you see the world. A man who has never read lives in a small room with no windows. Every book you open is a window, and through it you see new horizons. You learn that there are many ways to live, many ways to think. You begin to question your assumptions, to challenge your biases. You become more compassionate because you have walked in the shoes of others through their stories. You become wiser because you have seen the consequences of foolishness played out on the page. But perhaps the most powerful gift of reading is that it teaches you how to think. In a world full of noise, where opinions are shouted but rarely examined, the ability to think clearly is rare. Reading forces you to slow down, to follow an argument, to weigh ideas. It trains your mind to be patient, to seek understanding rather than quick answers. A mind that reads is a mind that cannot be easily deceived. Some say they do not have time to read. But the truth is, we all have the same hours in the day. The difference is in how we use them. The minutes you spend scrolling through empty distractions are minutes you could have spent feeding your mind. The hours lost in worry or idle gossip are hours you could have spent in the company of the greatest thinkers who ever lived. Others say they find reading difficult. And it is true. Reading is a skill, and like any skill, it requires practice. The more you read, the easier it becomes. Start with simple books, with stories that capture your imagination. Let yourself be drawn in. Do not worry about speed or quantity. What matters is not how many books you finish, but how deeply they affect you. Imagine your mind as a garden. Without care, it will grow wild, filled with weeds and thorns. But if you tend to it, if you plant the seeds of good books, it will flourish. Your thoughts will become clearer, your heart stronger, your spirit more resilient. So if you have ever felt that life is passing you by, if you have ever longed for something more, pick up a book. Let the words sink into your soul. Let them challenge you, comfort you, change you. Because reading is not just about gaining knowledge. It is about transforming your life. And who knows? Perhaps one day, someone will look at you as Elias' village looked at him, and they will see not just a person but a story of growth, of strength, of a life well lived. And that story will begin with a simple act, the turning of a page.